Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to have you here. I hope you all had a lovely lunch here in Spain. My name is Cristiana Fragola, and I have the honor and the pleasure to moderate this session with 6 wonderful speakers that I will briefly introduce. I'm currently the regional director for C40. C40, the regional director of Europe for C40, and C40 is a global network of cities, mega cities, and innovator cities, really 63 of them now, not just 40, that work around the world committed to tackling climate change and get ready for climate risks, changes, and assessment. And Barcelona is one of our cities. So I'm glad to introduce you to Larry Ng. And he's, as you can see, the Group Director of Architecture and Urban Design Excellence at URA, the Planning and Conservation Authority of Singapore. Larry has more than 20-year experience and has introduced many innovative design solutions to bring up the standards of public housing to be comparable to those of private housing. And each speaker is going to have a chance to introduce himself or herself shortly. After Larry, we have Sam Adams, and I'm sure that many of you know him because under his leadership as the mayor of Portland, former mayor of Portland, but once a mayor, always a mayor, and he really helped Portland to become one of the most progressive and innovative cities when it comes to innovation, sustainability, and preparedness. And Portland is also a city member of C40. We then have Sylvie Spalmacin-Roma. I just said that name 3 times earlier to make sure I said it right, I hope. And Sylvie, she's the Vice President of Smarter Cities in Europe. She's currently the IBM Vice President for Smarter Cities in Europe. And after 2 years in that area, driving Smarter Cities in France. However, you will see she speaks excellent English, and that's because before that, she also worked in London and in New York City. She was previously responsible for defining the strategic vision and deployment of the IBM portfolio to the SMEs market. We then go to India. You cannot say that this panel isn't geographically diverse. And it is my honor to introduce you to Amitabh Kant. He's very proud to bear the last name of the philosopher. And he even asked me to call him Emmanuel, but I think I'll stick with Amitabh for now. And he's the CEO and Managing Director of the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor Development Corporation, India's most ambitious infrastructure program aiming to develop new cities as smart, or maybe smarter, cities. We then have Nick Brooke. And if he says something bad, he told me I can call him Nicholas, as his mother did when he was in trouble. The truth is that Nick is anything but trouble. He's actually chairing 3 different commissions in Hong Kong. So he's chairing, as you can see from the bio, the Hong Kong Science Technology Parks Corporation. But in addition to that, he's also chairing the Hong Kong Harbourfront Commission. And then, I guess in his spare time, he's also the executive chairman of the Commission on Strategic Development. So if anything is right in Hong Kong, I guess Nick is involved. And if anything is wrong in Hong Kong, Nicholas is involved. And he has also given particular contribution in promoting innovation and technology development in Hong Kong, but also in China, broadly speaking. Then, last but certainly not least, we have Antonio Alfonso, or Antonio, as he wants to be called, which gives me the right to then call everyone else by first name. And he is currently the International Department Director of FCC Environmental Service. And he'll explain you exactly what that does, but many of you may already know about it because it's a pretty large international waste management company. He was trained as a civil engineer at the Technical University of Madrid, and then he has an MBA from nothing else but Wharton. And Alfonso spent the early year of his career at Dragados and Goldman Sachs before joining FCC. So this is my wonderful panel. I gave you basically the introduction that you already knew, if you read the program, or maybe you didn't. But just before we tackle our conversation, since we do have the leisure of 90 minutes, I'd like to give each one of them the chance to say a few words exactly about what they do today and perhaps how that contextualizes to smart cities. So, Larry, would you mind to start?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Christina. Very good afternoon to all of you. I'm Larry from Urban Redevelopment Authority, URA in short. URA is the National Land Use Planning and Conservation Authority in Singapore. So our mission is to make Singapore a great city to live, work, and play in. Just a little bit about Singapore. Singapore is very small. In fact, we started in 1965 with 580 square kilometers. Over the years, we've increased our land from 580 to now 714 square kilometers. So the challenge for us is always the land scarce, Singapore. So we have to be very creative. So in 1965, we gained independence from Malaysia without any resources. All we have is 1.65 million people. And of course, through the vision and hard work of our first Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, we are what we are today after 48 years. In 1965, when we first became a city, we are a city, one of the poorest nations with no resources. We have overcrowding, we have sanitation problems, we have most problems that what's originally city started. So over 48 years, today Singapore is considered one of the most livable city in Asia. So ranking by many of the authorities like Mercer, EIU, Monocles, Singapore is ranked 25 out of 221 cities. So we are very thankful to our Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, who has all the foresight. Now, really what we did over the years is by having two very important plans. We work as what we call WOG, whole of government. We need to get all the agencies together to work as one body. And on top of that, we need to work in partnership with the communities, with the private sectors, in order to achieve what we have today. We have two basic plans. One of them is what we call concept plan. Our first concept plan started in 1971 with the aid from United Nations. That is a very simple plan that tells you basically where are the main facilities like airport in Changi, for example. Now, those days, these concept plans, we planned for 40 to 50 years ahead. And that was the reason why today, Singapore is lucky to have an area, a seamless extension of our central business district into Marina Bay, our second new downtown, which is reclaimed in 1970 for 372 hectares of land. Now, our next layer of plan, which is very important to us, is what we call the master plan. And master plan is really a very transparent statutory plan that spells out what are the allowable land use and the intensity. So we are very, very, transparent in terms of that. In fact, all of you can download our Master Plan 2008 from the applications, and you get to know Singapore by that. Now, even though now, for 48 years, we've come a long way, we are considered one nation that has transformed from a third world city to the first world city within one generation, so to speak. But our problems and challenges are still there because we can never grow any further.
Right.
So we have to think very creatively. I think we will discuss more as we go along.
Absolutely, but definitely your land restriction, your land asset is,
sure,
is the defining aspect of Singapore. Sam, I actually forgot to mention that Sam not only was this innovative mayor, but before that he had 12 years of experience as chief of staff for the former mayor, and then he was also city commissioner for city council. So we're really talking to a real expert about public sector and city management here. So Sam.
Well, you've got a lot of experts up here, and based on my attendance at the various programs today, it's a whole conference full of experts. I currently work for the City Club of Portland, which is nearly a 100-year-old NGO, nonpartisan organization that does research and advocacy on that research and public forums, all focused at civic innovation. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. When I was elected mayor, retired last January, when I was elected mayor, Portland had a long tradition of sustainability and being a leader in green practices, and I really wanted to take it to the next level. Because when you're the top of sustainability and green practices in the United States, and I've said this in Portland and all over the world where I travel, where I have the opportunity to speak to crowds like you, when you're #1 in the United States, you need to be humble because that's high praise on a relatively low sustainable standard of the United States policies. But I wanted to push it forward, and I wanted to try to push it forward in a way that it would stick and show results for a long time. And one of the first things I did was to take an inventory of the government agencies that were doing work within the city of Portland. And the city of Portland is about 146 square miles. And what we learned through that simple inventorying effort is that government expenditures in the city of Portland at all the levels, federal, state, county, local, all the levels of government, of which there are about 70 units of government, 70 distinct units of government in addition to city government that do work within the boundaries of the city of Portland, and they spend about $11 billion a year within the 146 square miles that is the city of Portland. And what became very clear is that those various levels and units of government were singing off different song sheets, were singing at different places if they happened to be on the same song sheet, and that if we were going to move forward a more robust effort around sustainability to become a smarter city, a smart, truly smart city, that we were going to have to get alignment, more alignment on those 50 to 70 plus units of government that at the federal and the state and 25 units just on the local governmental basis, school districts, water and soil conservation districts, county, metro, a whole host of local governments. If we were really going to move forward Portland as a smart city to the next level, again, we had to get alignment, more alignment. So we embarked on an effort that is called the Portland Plan, and you can find it online at pdxplan.com. And it involved initially those 25 units of local government. It involved the public, it involved academia, NGOs, nonprofits. It also involved the private sector in really looking at where we were as a city. What had been the trends up to that point? What was likely going to be the trends moving forward? Of those trends, which trends could we move if we acted better together? And what trends we simply had to accommodate, we had to accept and figure out a way to make the best of them if they were negative trends, and if they were positive trends, how do we accentuate that? It was about a 2.5, 3-year effort to complete the Portland Plan, and in the end, we came up with 4 goals, 12 measures of success. The work was divided into 9 action areas, and in addition to being a 25-year plan, we had increments of 5-year action areas. The 4 goals, they would be the same for many cities across the globe: prosperity, healthy, educated, and equitable. Those 12 measures behind those 4 goals, though, really is an effort to focus the work, the real work, around aligning all those layers of government. When you're working, when these jurisdictions are working, federal, state, wherever, that go well beyond their responsibilities, well beyond the city of Portland, but when they're working in the city of Portland, to really get them aligned to what we mean in Portland when we say we want to be a smarter city, and to be accountable for that.
Excellent, excellent. Madame Spalmacin-Roma, I know. Sylvie, your turn.
So IBM launched the Smarter Cities initiative end of 2008. It was seen as a big bet from our research organization. And as we speak today, we can see that the big bet did translate in a true market. We launched first a vision and we truly believed that it was the time for us to explain that the technology about data analysis, predictability, algorithm to predict the future and help the cities make decisions, all of the data analytics that we had in hands and that we continue developing in IBM were absolutely ready to be put in the hands of city leaders for preparing their future. At the same time, we have been seeing many consultants reporting about the growth and the acceleration of growth of urbanization in our planet. And at the beginning, if we believed that the majority of the business would be in the emerging market, we found out that the developed economies were the first one to embrace the Smarter Cities initiative. And the reason for that is that in the developed market, the public space is reducing, and we cannot answer to the growth of urbanization by putting more roads, putting more trains, and adding more infrastructure. And therefore, many city leaders started to think that it was the time to look at new ways, innovative ways to solve their issues moving forward. So Smarter Cities is not only about a vision. As I said, it is a true business. From our announcement in 2008, then in 2010, after more than 1,000 experiences and projects with cities like Rio de Janeiro, that is going to speak in a parallel session later today, then those cities inspired an application that we launched that is called the IBM Intelligent Operations Center. And that Intelligent Operations Center, if I give it to a city, it's not going to do many things for you. Because not only the data, the technology has to be ready, which is the case, but the second important constituent for being a smarter cities is that people, organizations who have been used to work in silo start to sing the same song.
Right, right.
And then you go to a very important step. The technology, everybody can understand it. We can embrace it, not embrace it. It's not the point. Everybody can understand. But then the transformation is truly about a new governance. And the combination of technology and governance is really what makes a city smart, and a city leveraging the data, leveraging this natural resource that data can provide today with collaboration under a new governance in a city is what makes a smart city.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sylvie. Amitabh Emmanuel, your turn.
Well, I'm the CEO of the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor. This is a project which links up Delhi to Mumbai, and actually we're creating 7 greenfield cities on this transit corridor between the 2 metros. Our challenge is very different from the one spoken here about, because India is going to see a huge urbanization. The latest McKinsey study talks about by the year 2030, we'll have 350 million Indians getting into the process of urbanization. By 2050, 700 million additional Indians getting into the process of urbanization. Now, this will happen at a time when India will pass through a window of demographic transition when 70% of our population will be below the age of 30. Now, it's very different because in India, greenfield urbanization has just begun, whereas it's ended across Europe, it's ended across America, it's nearing its completion in China, and therefore they will keep doing retrofitting. Whereas in India, it's completely greenfield. And therefore, The challenge is not to repeat the mistakes of what has been done in America. When America urbanized, it created sprawling cities. It created cities where you could live in New Jersey, travel to Manhattan, and guzzle gas. And therefore, they created cities like Atlanta, where 98% of the people travel by car. And the ecological footprint of Atlanta is 12 times more than Barcelona. And therefore, if we were to follow the model of America, you need 4 planet Earth. You don't have 4 planet Earth. You have 1 planet Earth. And therefore, you need a far more innovative, far more sustainable strategy of urbanization. And I think it's important that countries like India set this trend of compact, dense cities which are sustainable for the people. Now, I think the key is, how do you use technology to leapfrog? How do you use technology to make a quantum jump forward? But not technology for the sake of technology. Technology must be harnessed for the people. And the challenge in India is very different. The challenge is the challenge of education, the challenge of health, the challenge of transport mobility. And these are challenges which will be used for the people of India. And therefore, when you talk about digital technology, when you talk about a smarter planet, when you talk about smart and intelligent cities, you necessarily have to use technology for people to make a big jump forward. Now, when you do this, we've integrated. Actually, our project is the only project. When you talk about smarter cities, some of it has been done in Rio de Janeiro, some in Amsterdam. But ours is the first project anywhere in the world which has integrated geographical planning with smart city planning from grassroots level itself. And therefore, IBM and Cisco have worked with us. Now, there's a huge challenge. The challenge is one of the geographical planners being totally on a different wavelength from what IBM and Cisco is talking about. The ICT planners and the geographical planners do not converge. And unless they do not converge, it is not possible to create a smarter planet for tomorrow. And therefore, there is a need to integrate geographical planning. Architects, planners must understand this world of ICT. And therefore, the information communication technology networking must be done along with architects and planners, number one. Number two, you can't use technology for ordering McDonald's, and you need to use technology really to bring in greater level of penetration of technology for purposes of real-time governance. And by real-time governance, I mean education, health, etc. There is a third issue, and therefore, the third issue is one of at what price points technology. Technology must be made available at the right price points, and I've seen this huge revolution in mobile telephony in India, where prices radically fell. When prices fell, today you have about 800 million people. We are increasing our mobile density by about 14 million a month, simply because it's at the right price. And therefore, technology, the smarter technology, must be available at the right price points. And therefore, to my mind, technology will be the key driver of growth in emerging nations like India. It'll be the key driver of urbanization. But there are huge challenges, and these challenges must be met. But the important thing is, don't repeat the mistakes which the Western world has already made. It must set the trend for a completely smart planet of tomorrow by its own indigenous planning.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, Nick, try to top that one.
I was going to say, difficult act to follow, yes.
It's definitely a philosopher there, not just a planner.
I'd just like to set context, if I may. My world is a world of two worlds, if you like. You heard earlier about my involvement with Hong Kong, but I'm also an advisor to the Chinese government on land and planning matters. So I'd like just to talk about two worlds, because they are very different worlds, and they're both very relevant to today, I think. First of all, Hong Kong. You heard the Singapore pitch earlier. I'll make the Hong Kong pitch now. We're unique in many ways. The arrangements that were entered into in 1997, whereby Hong Kong became a special administrative region of China, and we have a 50-year tenure, as you probably know. All the systems that were in place before 97 were allowed to run through: common law, level playing field, clarity in terms of doing business, all the positive things, if you like, were allowed to run through to 2047. So we have this very unique, if you like, soft infrastructure, which I think is very sustainable going forward. In terms of the physical characteristics of Hong Kong, 1,100 square kilometers, slightly larger than Singapore, 7 million people, so a slightly larger population. But we face exactly the same constraints, particularly in terms of land and land area, because 2/3 of Hong Kong, for those who don't know, is country park. You won't believe it when you look at the pictures, but that's the reality. So our population per square kilometre is over 20,000 people per square kilometre, which is one of the densest populations, I think, across Asia and certainly in many other jurisdictions. What challenges are we addressing? We're a vertical community, if I may describe it as that. We're very clearly, density is a big challenge. So in terms of our agenda, we've set about addressing what we describe as the quality of life issues. So it's all about waste, it's all about energy, it's all about air quality, it's all about sustainable transportation. And I'm sure when we come to technology, we'll be talking about some of those areas. But quality of life to us is one of the main drivers of our agenda. The other thing that we're addressing is aging in place, and I've not heard that talked about today in any depth, but we see it as a very interesting model going forward, not building aging communities, not moving people from where they're living, but accommodating their aging in place. And it's a very major initiative in terms of Hong Kong's agenda. Just in terms of mainland China, many of the issues that were echoed earlier about India are also applicable. Urbanization. A number of times I'm in Beijing and we sit down and we talk about urbanization. 200 million people by way of a grey population across the cities of China. No rights, no fixed abode, no fixed employment, just squatting, waiting, hoping to develop rights over time. And another 300 million destined to land in the cities over the next 10 years. So that is a huge issue, and one which China and indeed India are going to have to deal with. Cities playing catch up. There are 112 cities in China with a population of over 1 million people. And each of those cities is trying to play catch up, particularly in terms of infrastructure and sustainable development. It was growth for growth's sake, and now they're paying the price. So every mayor, every leader is struggling with this particular initiative. Regeneration, we talk a lot about urbanization, greenfield development, but most of the stock that was built in the last 20, 30 years is not of standard, it's substandard stock, and will have to be redeveloped in the foreseeable future. So it's not just urbanization, it's regeneration as well. And then the whole issue of land ownership in mainland China, particularly land ownership in the rural areas. There is no land ownership, as you probably know. It's communal ownership. The communes, the people in the communes have communal ownership. How do they develop rights? How does China provide them with such rights over time so that they can develop a sense of ownership and a sense of belonging? And then just one final thing in the context of Hong Kong. What's very interesting is prior to '97, everybody in Hong Kong was in transit mode. They're on their way to someone else, refugees from China, people, expatriates on short-term contracts. People in Hong Kong didn't have confidence in the future. We're now seeing people put down roots, developing a sense of ownership, a sense of belonging. And that is changing the whole way that we engage and the whole way that people want to be involved in deciding their future. Very, very dramatic change in the public attitudes. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll deepen more when we go into the questions. Antonio.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be sharing this panel with such colleagues representing such institutions. For FCC, it is a great honor actually to be here today in a World Congress dealing with smart cities, precisely here in Barcelona, where our company was founded more than 100 years ago. Ever since, we've been providing services to many local entities, including Barcelona, by the way, and of course to many of their citizens. Today, FCC is a leading provider of what we call smart services. We are very active in three main fields, which are waste management, water and infrastructures, and we operate actually across the globe. We consider all these to be very linked, of course, to urban development, and indeed we are somehow a link between citizens and cities. In many cases, we serve directly through our contracts cities, although the final users are, of course, or their citizens. Let me simply highlight a couple of strengths and characteristics of FCC as we consider us to be, among the top providers on this sort of services. These are, one, our broad experience, again tracing back to the 1900s, and the second one is innovation. And let me give you an example. More than 20 years ago, when not many people were dealing with these issues, we started developing our own electric vehicles. As of today, we operate what is probably the largest fleet across Europe with 1,500 vehicles, electric, hybrid, and gas proposed vehicles. This, of course, started very early, and now we are seeing the results of this innovative approach that we still, of course, apply to all our services. With this, I will simply stop and hopefully start the interaction. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, so as you've seen, we have a very, very diversified but an excellent quality panel. And I'd like to tackle some of these questions that have been suggested, and perhaps others if we have time. And as far as the first one is concerned, I'd rather hear from the cities first and then give the business sector the opportunity to answer, perhaps addressing also what the city officials say. So Larry, starting with you, we definitely know that land, or rather lack of land for Singapore is a challenge. But in addition to that, what are other challenges of the 21st centuries that Singapore and other cities you may be familiar with most urgently need to tackle and may be already addressed in your master plan?
Sure. I think first in general, we do know that by 2050, 70% of the world population, by then it will be about 6.3 billion people will be living in urbanized area.
Right.
And that's an increase from today's population of 3.6 billion. Of that, half of the increase, 1.4 billion, comes from Asia. So Asia has got lots of challenges, especially China, India, and ASEAN countries. Mm-hmm. So population increase, what does that mean? It means there's a lot of unique, great pressures on existing infrastructures. So there will be issues of clean water, there'll be issues of availability of water, all right? There are many other issues because of the rising trend. But in addition to that, you also have the profile of the population that makes a different impact and challenges. For example, many cities, especially in Japan and even in Singapore, we're looking at Asian population, and mind you, also in Europe. So we also have to look at what are some of the challenges and some of the solutions that you have to put in place. Now, in Singapore, our challenge has always been land issue. I mean, that is a fact, all right? So we need to find more land to cater to our future growth. So how do we do that? We have to look at creativity. So actually what we are looking at, we know we can't go too much sideways. We have to go high upwards, and now we're going downwards. So what do? In fact, we have just completed our so-called Jurong Rock Cavern, which is 130 to 150 meters underground, and that's used to store oil. So what does that mean? When you store oil, you do away of this oil drum that's on the surface, and you free up land for better usage. So another example, for example, we have this concept of deep tunnel sewage system. We have many sewage water treatment plants all around the whole island. So by having a deep tunnel sewage system, we only have 2 plants, and we call them water reclamation plant. Because they are so deep, all the lands are now free for use. And these so-called water reclamation plant, we have new technology. Well, you can say smart technology. We have our new water. So all the recycled water using membrane is now generated called new water that is meant to be used. So to me, the challenge in Singapore now, besides this land constraint, is how to maintain a sustainable and livable environment. Now for that, from what we have done over the last 48 years, I also want to invite all of you to join us, because I'm also the managing director for the World City Summit. This is a biennial summit that happens in Singapore every 2 years. in first week of June 2014. And over in that summit, it is a platform, our contribution for the world cities to learn and to share from one another so that you don't go through all the mistakes that cities have all gone through. So, and also, I'm also the Prize Secretary for the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize, which is dubbed the Nobel Prize for City. And Spain, Bilbao is the first laureate in 2010, and New York City, last year, second laureate. So we hope many of you are from cities. You can also do a submission for our third is already underway, and the fourth cycle next year.
Excellent, thank you, Larry. So very interesting to hear how you're handling not just the sky is the limit, but the bottom of the ocean, it sounds like.
Yes, we have to think very creatively.
And you couldn't tap into it, it sounds like, without technology, so we'll hear more from them. But Sam, very much resonated as a former city employees myself with your opening remarks, so to speak, about how as a mayor, as the #1 accountable voted public official in your city, you understood that before even outsourcing ICT, smart meters, smart grids, and smart everything, it was the time to really look at smart management and this silos structure where each city agency drive its own agenda is really a big challenge, which working with cities, I certainly recognize from a lot of city delegates. So, you know, really kudos to you for having the foresight of creating this interagency task force, it sounds like, among your 70 units to facilitate coordination. And I know that that's an example that other cities are following successfully. But in addition to that challenge, which I just feel is important to highlight because it also ties to the smart governance concept that Sylvie was mentioning before, what are other challenges that you encounter?
Well, I would say another challenge is that planning, at least in the United States, and I say this with love, and I say this with respect, but planning in the United States involves too much input from engineers and architects, and not enough input from folks from the public health arena and from the educational arena, and from folks in and outside of government that are focused on tackling inequity. And what this morning Kurt from MIT talked about, people-focused, or I talk about people-empowered planning, I think is what anyone, whatever role you have in trying to make a city better, has got to try to figure out. And all of this work, as Sylvie said, and everyone here alluded to, all of this work in service to helping the residents of our cities and beyond achieve their highest potential is not just a nice thing to say, not just really an even obvious thing to say, but with 50% going on to 70%, cities are becoming more important than national governments in terms of what the future of our planet will be and will hold. And so that would be the second thing I would say, is the over-deference in our thinking more than anything else, that national governments are going to figure this out, I think is betting on a racehorse that isn't the fleetest of foot and fastest racehorse out there. Cities, if they're willing to sort of take on the responsibility of getting at everyone else that does work that I talked about, the different layers that already are doing work in each and every city around the globe, if mayors and city councils take on that responsibility, not just of creating plans for what they're directly responsible for, but getting others to join in holistic dimensional plans around prosperity, education, health, and equity, we as cities can achieve what, for example, the climate action goals that right now seem to elude national governments, and I think will continue to elude national governments unless cities step up.
Great, excellent. Green frogging.
Green frogging, great.
Green frogging.
Somebody buy that URL, greenfrog.com, greenfrogging.com.
Sylvie, I'm going to come to you and Anthony just after the cities has spoken. I just want cities to explain their challenges and then give Sylvie and Anthony, the chance to address perhaps those challenges as well. But from your perspective, what are some of the challenges in addition to the population growth that you mentioned earlier?
That's me?
Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, I think you've got to get the rules of the game clear. And first and foremost, to my mind, we must be very clear that the American model of urbanization is dead and it's outmoded.
We got that somehow.
You know, just to give you one example, I mean, if you were to bring the ecological footprint of Atlanta to the level of Barcelona, and that is the flawed planning in Atlanta of 98.2% of the people traveling by car to the level of Barcelona, you'll have to break Atlanta apart and create a public transportation system with 4,619 metro system. So the planning was flawed. The American geographical planning is flawed.
Let's be
Number
clear,
one.
there was no planning.
Yeah. Number
It
two.
was in Portland.
Yeah.
No. I'm just saying
number two.
He's absolutely right. There was no good planning in Atlanta.
Number two, whatever you do, you have to do it on the back of high access mass transit corridor. The entire planning process, the function of a smart city is on the basis of its transport mobility, and therefore cities have to be planned on the back of public transportation system. That's the key. The third issue I want to point out is that most of the lessons of smart cities don't come from the western part of the world, they come from the eastern part of the world. They come from a place called Kitakyushu in Japan, which actually became the most polluted city in the world when Japan progressed. In 70s, it became the most polluted city, but today you go there, it's the most recycled city in the world. Everything is recycled. From cars to mobile to everything is recycled. They come from Singapore, which recycles its water and waste very effectively. They come from Yokohama, which has saved almost 39% of its wastage brought down and saved about $4 billion from. So I think the important thing in any smart city is the geographical planning. And the second key issue to my mind is that the era of vertical planning, of creating verticals out of power, water, public safety, that's dead. And today you need horizontal integration across sectors. And that horizontal integration is the key today. And that, to my mind, is only possible. Retrofitting makes it very difficult. Greenfield urbanization that is happening in places like India, you need to embed it right from the beginning. And if you are able to embed geographical planning and digital planning together and converge it in the right manner, is what will enable the world to grow in a far more sustainable manner. That, to my mind, holds the key.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Nick.
We go up and we go down, but just three other challenges that I think are worth mentioning. The car, which has been alluded to already. Diversity and affordability. Maybe just pick up those three very quickly. The car, 3 million cars in Beijing, 2.5 million cars in Shanghai, 200 million cars in China. The whole of the system, essentially, although they're doing better now with their high-speed rail, but the whole of every single city in China has been designed around the road, excuse me, and not around public transport. I mean, in Hong Kong, we had the foresight to build a very robust public transport system. 85% of our population travels on public transport every day. We only have 200,000 cars in Hong Kong, 7 million people. So very low ratios, very low ratios. So again, echoing what you say, the public transport model is so, so crucial. Diversity. When I talk about diversity, I'm thinking of diversity in the widest context. We've just done a very major exercise in Hong Kong, studying what we regard as the top 60 cities in the world, and diversity came up top by a mile, by a mile. Diversity of employment, diversity of education, diversity of heritage, entertainment, etc., diversity of quality of life. So diversity is a key, I think, driver in terms of making sure that you have a solid platform on which to build your city. And then finally, affordability. Virtually every city in Asia is struggling with affordability, particularly in the residential sector, affordability of housing. Very few people today can afford to get on the ladder, So your social housing program is becoming even more important today, both public rental and assisted purchase. And that is part of the mix that you have to build into your planning going forward.
Thank you, thank you. Sylvie, do you want to speak to the challenges and perhaps some?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think that all of us are talking about the end point, which is bringing better services to the citizens. And in a city, there are citizens, if they can live there with a good quality, and of course, if there is good economic development and vitality. So in order to achieve that, then you have got cities like you said, Kitakyushu, who moved from a desperate position and embraced very fast the 21st century technology in order to retain their citizens and then move to a future that is a good future. And I have to say that unfortunately, too often, and still too often, we see innovation and the usage of technology being taken by, in priority, those cities, regions, or lands that are desperate in solving a specific issue. Two examples. One, I think that today in the world, the only place where the electricity company and the water company formed a joint venture to manage water and electricity together is the island of Malta. And the reason for that was that they found themselves several years ago absolutely desperate with the electricity company unable to provide the peak of electricity and the water unable to provide potable water because it was produced by half of it by desalination and therefore a lot of electricity. And at the same time, with the aging infrastructure on the island, they were losing an average of 25 to 30% of the potable water because of leakage. So as they were very desperate with the government willing to continue growing the economy with tourism, but being respective of the carbon footprint, going for a new power plant based on fossil fuel was not the way to go. So they launched a vast program putting in place 250,000 smart meters and equipping the electricity and the water network and providing the data back to the citizen who can contribute because they know every day how much they spend and how they spend it. While in many of our traditional countries, we still look at water and electricity as a tax because we understand 3 months after spending it, how we spend it, and it's too late. We do not act upon it, and therefore, well, in the everyday life, even if on part of our head we believe and we are convinced we need to care about water and the climate, well, we do not do very much. So giving the data back to the citizen and putting in place the infrastructure, not saying, well, we will think about the infrastructure cost first, and then at some point we will embark the ICT and the technology of the data is not the way to go. You need to design the future in taking the two together. And I would say this is happening not only in the eastern part. Some good countries like Netherlands embarked on a project related to managing the water for all the country. This is called the Digital Delta Project, and you will hear more in other sessions about this project. But to make it short, the country decided to have all constituencies who could contribute in providing data related to water, related to the level of rivers, related to whatever weather forecast, etc., to provide it so that the many sources of data related to water can be shared for being able to predict the future. Until we start that project, imagine that in this country where 55% of the people live below the sea level, and with the climate change, we understand what that means. In fact, the flood management data were not talking to the water management data. So all of this now changed because not only the political leaders, but the water board company and regions like the Delft region said, we need to integrate and inject the capability of data analytics and prediction into our planning for the future. And it's not after that we are going to look at it. It's from the day one of the design.
Okay, great. And that's what Amitabh would say, real-time data. And so Sylvie, it almost sounds like, as I was listening to your Malta example, and this ties to what you had mentioned in our prep sessions, almost as if you use the example of water and energy, as if data becomes a natural resource in itself, an asset that, just like water is and just like sunlight is, that an administration can use to really optimize ultimately its services. So very interesting
in fact,
to think of data as a resource,
right,
like an asset, like.
We say in IBM that data is the next natural resource. And the reason for it is that our landscape, our cities are very much instrumented today. And the instrumentation that I am talking about is able to provide data. And the interconnection that we have already can send those data in a place to be administered and leveraged. The issue is that, as many of you said, cities are still very much organized in silo.
Right.
So it's good in a way because you need skilled people to care about water network, about electricity network, about transportation and public transportation network, etc. So you need some deep skills. But each of those have not been used to share the data of their silo.
Or horizontally, yeah.
And everybody understands that when flood is predicted on a given area of a city, it will have impact for the citizens, so you better evacuate in advance. So you better manage it with the public transportation, with the people that will have to take care of the population you evacuate. And all of that was the starting point of the project with Rio de Janeiro, which ended with the implementation of a center of operation for the everyday life of the city. Yeah. And many of the cities are moving to this collaborative and horizontal organization now.
Yeah. And your data was also used to inspire behavioral change in the citizens in moderating their consumption, which I think that's also the inclusive piece that can help in that. So, Antonio.
Yes, well, I would like to add a couple of ideas here to the table. The challenges are clear. I would only maybe make a comment, which is that, of course, for mature cities, and we see that in Europe, we still face many challenges, maybe slightly different to the ones we see in India, where the challenge is there, but we also have the opportunity to start from scratch in some cases, from geographical planning, as you mentioned. Of course, that's what needs to be done. But you know, good or bad, the situation in some European cities is simply different, of course. But I think that there is one common challenge, which is economic and financial sustainability. And I think that this is very important. Of course, cities across the world, as well as citizens, we all want, you know, high quality of service, environmentally sustainable services. But this, although technology is there and can be used, and I would say is widely spread as of today, Unfortunately, it requires, in many cases, significant investments. And this is at the end the challenge. Even when you are starting from scratch, if you really want to do it right, not only on the planning side, if you really want to implement what you planned, that requires high investments, for sure much higher than simply doing it to a lower level. I think that there are two issues that are important regarding this economic or financial sustainability. One is to make sure that the legal framework is there to allow for private investments. This is, as well as technology, this is already available across the globe, and there are lots of institutions willing to invest in infrastructures as well as in urban services, and it is important that there is a clear framework, because these are, of course, long-term investments that require the appropriate court to be dealt with. Second, and I think that this is also related, for instance, to what to do with this data that we can manage properly, and is to make sure that external costs are forced into the equation. Why? Because otherwise, although we could make use of the data and the technology and even the investments, it doesn't simply fit financially, because many external costs are simply flying away. And this is, of course, a real challenge. So if we really want people to move in public transportation, because this is the only sustainable way, and for sure in certain cities it is, well, there needs to be found a way to have them incentivized to use it instead of a private car. Be it through taxes, be it through subsidies to public transportation, name it, but you know, something needs to be in place. And I think that this is very important. I would highlight that the challenges are more or less well known. We have already bad experiences that we can learn from. The technology is available, the data can now be shared and used wisely, but the economic model is at the end the key.
That's fantastic. A Wharton business graduate talking about incorporating negative externalities in pricing. This is like a dream come true. But so I think that I just want to be mindful of time. We have 15 minutes left before we go to questions. It seems to me that ranking top on the political agenda, there is a consensus here, and you can chime in if it's wrong, that integration is key. Integration between architects, urban planners, and ICT, and civil employees, integration among cities' agencies, integration with aging population, with public housing and social housing. So really, it sounds to me like a smart city, first and foremost, is a city that focuses on this integration before even upgrading the aging infrastructure or developing new infrastructure, not like the LA model. But just quickly, before we go to the third question, and I want to quickly touch base on the three elected officials, three city delegates and one elected official. Could you name, in addition to integration, one or two top ranking issues that you would make part of your political agenda for sustainability and for creating sustainable urban settlements if you were elected mayor tomorrow, or if you were re-elected mayor tomorrow? Larry, okay. One or two, and then we go
definitely for us, and perhaps even general for city, engaging the community for sustainable urban living. I agree with Sam. Social sustainability is key now. In fact, I think social sustainability is probably more important than environmental and economic sustainability going forward. Early this year in Singapore, we have a huge population debate. We are looking at, by 2030, a population of 6.9 million. Now our population is 5.4 million. So within a short span, we have to cater for such thing. So what do? It's actually engaging the public. What do they want to see? What are some of the feedback they have? So that we plan ahead now, allowing for that to happen in 2030. Now, since the discussion, we haven't really had so-called interacted, so to speak, all right, on smart city. Perhaps I'd like to say a couple of words from a city point of view on what is a smart city. To me, a smart city is first and foremost a city that is smartly planned to provide a livable, environmentally friendly, and inclusive environment. However, it must also embrace technology to enhance services, that's what Sylvie says, as well as to enable intelligent decision making. All the big data we're talking about is to enable the leaders to make intelligent decisions. So for example, in Singapore, we are the first to introduce in 1998 so-called electronic road pricing system. That's smart technology. So with that technology that we implemented, the road congestion is probably one of the least as far as all the world cities are concerned. So you need to employ some of this smart technology. Singapore is known for being #1 as an e-government. Yes, we do that. All the smart facilities that we can engage is put into better use. But to me, the basic must be there for all cities, like what Amitabh mentioned. I think when you are from developing cities, the basic issue has to be addressed first. And maybe you don't have to wait until you advance, and then the smart issues comes in to enhance the services further.
Great, excellent. Sam, one or two top ranking?
In addition to integration, set goals. Set goals of what kind of city you want to be.
And then use technology to hold accountability to the goal.
The advantage of the tools available now is that you can learn from the experience of other cities, and you can reverse engineer, whether it's greenfield development or it's retrofitting existing neighborhoods through eco-districts. There are all kinds of opportunities to set goals that are tough, but doable. The second thing I would say as well is money's in such short supply. Demand for public services are so great that the expectation that any major public policy, any major public investment has to have what we call twofers or threefers. There's got to be more than, there at least has to be 2, 3, 4 major benefits to that new transit line, and it's got to, you challenge ourselves to how do we improve the academic achievement along the new transit line, and to think about every significant public investment has to make significant progress towards prosperity, education, health, and equity.
Okay, great, great. Quickly, one or two additional political top-ranking item you would tackle?
I think first and foremost, a political leader must have the big vision to create the city of tomorrow. And that city of tomorrow has to be technologically led. Yeah. And whether we like it or not, this is inevitable. The smart city, the smart and intelligent city is here. It's here to stay. But it's important also to understand that technology is not the ultimate solution. Essentially, a city is made up of 3 different components. There's technological creativity, there's economic creativity of the people, the innovators, and there is a cultural and artistic creativity. And it's the people of that city who make it a live, vibrant city. Mm-hmm. And therefore, technology essentially has to harness the people, and the people must get used to that technology to make it a vibrant city. The third point I want to make it is that late starters have an advantage. And they must seize that advantage. They must seize that advantage to make a sustainable future. And therefore, the emerging countries, the Asian countries, have an advantage over the rest of the world, and they must seize that advantage to create a sustainable planet for tomorrow.
Excellent, thank you.
I'd agree, you need your champion, because with all these issues we're discussing, there's always going to be a strong minority view, which you're not going to convert, you're not going to carry with you. So at some stage, that champion has got to take it forward and carry the community with him. The other thing that you need very clearly is community buy-in, ownership. Yeah. And we've worked very hard in Hong Kong to persuade the community to buy into the various initiatives, if you like, that we're proposing. So it in the end, they believe they own them and they take them forward. But it's not just about technology, and I just wanted to make this point very strongly. we've had to work very hard to change the mindset from me to us.
Yeah.
And there's been a very strong campaign in Hong Kong to do that. We've also had to move away from not in my backyard, NIMBYism as we call it, to a more inclusive attitude, because everyone had agreed the ideas were splendid, but as soon as you suggested it happened in their district or in their vicinity, sorry, we're not so keen anymore. And also, we've had to work very hard at close collaboration between public and private, suggestions of collusion, etc., etc. Private regarded with a lot of suspicion, historically justified in some ways. So those are the three elements we've had to address in addition to making the technology change.
Excellent. Okay, so Sylvie, in the last few minutes, you heard from the city's representatives about the challenges, a key ranking point. Could you speak as to how you could address it? And also perhaps as to some business model that could help this happen. Cost and pricing has been mentioned as a challenge. So how could a business work with the city to address that too?
Just before going to the business model, that is very important, I'd like just at this point of the discussion to open up to the next level. Talking about the citizen who can also contribute in a very effective manner today with the technology that is available to the services of the city. So the citizens are the one, of course, using all the city's services, but they can also contribute to it. So education, transportation, relationship with the government, etc. So what do I mean by that? We have been used to analyze what we call factual data. So a sensor is giving you the temperature. This is factual data. But now we move in a world where the majority of all of us, we have this kind of device. And with this kind of device, we can tell the city hall, there is some garbage in my street, and when you have 10, 15 citizens saying the same thing in less than 1 hour time, then you do not need to have somebody in the city hall sitting behind the telephone. The technology can just extract from the voice message or the SMS the information to create immediately the mission for the right agency to go and fix the issue. So this is observational data. And you have the third level now that we know how to combine with the other, analyze and manage, which is social media analytics. And here you talk about sentiments, because the people that are putting 140 characters on Twitters, they are not putting observation, they are not putting factual data, they are writing with a strong opinion, positive or negative, about something. And here as well, we leverage now social media for helping city planners or city leaders in understanding what is the citizen experience or the tourist experience of the city, of the streets, of the public transportation, so that from the citizen point of view, they can understand what is the first thing that gets in the way, and you can have city leaders preparing an outstanding public transportation offering to citizens, but if there is no parking lot in order to park the car at the appropriate place in order to leverage the public transportation offering, then it doesn't work. So the combination of these 3 layers of data are now possible with the technology that we have. And not only we analyze the data, but we transform this analysis into proposition of decision and action, which makes the difference. So this is for opening with the new and innovative technology. In terms of business model, after the experience, I would say, of the past 25 years with the private sector, where many companies had to transform themselves and continue in transforming themselves to continue driving a positive business, we have got the experience particularly related in reducing cost of operation. And when you apply the reduction of cost of operation to cities, and when cities accept to open their books, then you can work with cities like city of Besançon in France, where they opened their books, and we found out that they were having 700 buildings that the municipality had to operate every year. And we proposed an asset management system in order to reduce by 15% the cost of operation of those 700 buildings for the municipality. Very pragmatic. Now, the mayor, at the first place, didn't intend to reduce the cost of operation from those buildings. His intent was to drive a new project related to weighting the waste and the garbage of the citizen in order to contribute in reducing garbage and improving garbage management in his city, but he needed funds for doing that. And what he did was leveraging the reduction of operation of his city from the asset management, reimburse some debts, and take the rest to fund the innovative projects. So this is the kind of positive, virtuous cycle that can be done leveraging the technology when you embed it now.
And was IBM paid out of the savings?
Well, in the asset and predictive management type of project, we have enough experience today to put contracts which are not cash out for the clients, which mean we take a percentage of the saving to reimburse ourselves.
Great.
And we have got a financing organization in IBM in order to ease doing that.
Did you hear that? Okay, great. Because I know that a lot of cities have upfront financing cost as an issue. So this is so Antonio, this kind of ties into what you were saying about creating a good fiscal and legal framework to work with the private sector.
Sure. Yeah, probably we don't have much time, I guess.
No,
if
we don't, but at least 3 more
but
minutes so that then we can go to Q&A.
Okay, but yeah, this I think that links to the point I was mentioning. And what is important is at the end that this trade-off between efficiency, some long-term, almost visionary goals, as was mentioned here, this needs to be addressed to the public, to the citizens, clearly and transparently, so that they can also, through democratic elections, be able to also decide what they wish. Sometimes we've seen, and unfortunately have some bad examples not far away from here in this country, in which the legal framework has been wrong, and we have created the illusion that things were simply sustainable when they were not. And I am now talking, for instance, about energy. I think that this is quite a dangerous situation. If you first install the subsidies and people think that green energy is for free, when it was not several years ago,
right.
It was interesting, but not for free. So this trade-off should be addressed properly. But then it is even worse when you get rid of the subsidies retroactively and you basically destroy confidence for private investors.
Yeah.
So when you look at that example, probably you should use it as something that needs to be done differently. And I think that it starts with being transparent from the very beginning and saying, look, this is going to be expensive now that we are investing, but then it will be more efficient, or it will be more environmentally friendly, or it will be more whatever, but be transparent from planning to implementation. I think that this is very important so that people know where they stand.
Excellent. So lesson learned both.
And that they understand the economic model, otherwise you might face some unsustainability risks.
Yeah, so for those emerging city learning, not just the bad lessons in planning, but also in setting wrong business models. Okay, so we have 10 minutes for the audience. I think there must be revolving mics. There is a question, someone standing there, then another one here. Are there? Oh no, you have to go to the standing mic. Okay. Great, if you could just briefly introduce yourself, and if you want one specific speaker to answer, please say so, otherwise the panel will take it.
Stéphane Roche, Laval University in Quebec, Canada. Related to this highly integrated vision of smart city, plus the 3 levels of data, and especially the user-generated content trend, I would like to highlight one issue that is related to this temptation of citizen control, you know. And from my perspective, one of the solutions is what is called digital literacy. And I'm really interested to have your thoughts, point of view about this potential issue and about this potential solution. I don't have any specific panelist in mind, but...
Okay, so one or two, because I want to get to a couple of other questions. So not all of you, but it's just who feels really compelled to answer? Okay, Nick.
Maybe I'll try anyway. We have a very big initiative ongoing in Hong Kong called Smarter Hong Kong, Smarter Living, which is a digital 21 strategy, essentially, all around digital, bringing digital basically to the community and underpinning the community through a major ICT initiative. So we do think it is important. We do think it's important in terms of connectivity and providing that platform of intelligence. So yes, I think it has to be on a smart city agenda.
And I hope there will be more and more user-friendly platforms. The other question back there, yes? Sorry, the light is hard to see. Yeah?
Thank you. Sunil Dubey from Sydney. And my question is, I think, to the entire panel, because you have selected, elected, expert, and sellers on this panel. And I ask this question as an academic. We speak and we are practicing in real world about smart cities. And one of the key terms which was used was about the smart education. Yet, in 2013, we find the teaching of urban planning is entirely based on the planning which we have been practicing for centuries. So our next generation of planners is in fact learning and experiencing by way of academia the mistakes which we have been continuously doing. So my question is, how do we revise and bring this smart planning and the smart cities where is essentially required at this point of time in academia, and we focus on smart planners, hopefully in a very short period of time?
Please.
Well, I think it's a very important question because, you know, you can't have a smart city with wrong geographical planning. And quite often, you know, in this world of today, we're doing the wrong kind of geographical planning. And there are very few planners who understand the concept of compact, dense, recyclable cities. I mean, I've done greenfield cities, and I've been working with urban planners, and it's a nightmare. It's a real nightmare trying to educate them on concepts of how to create new cities which are totally anti-American in character. You know, it's so important to teach them that today's cities don't have to be sprawling cities, because you know, they've been, over the years, generations of planners across developed world and developing worlds have been taught the model of American planning.
Absolutely.
And therefore, it's to my mind, that's the key, geographical planning. Number two, I think it's very important to understand this point, that your model of smart city, intelligent cities, smart and connected cities will all be dead if technology providers and technology suppliers like IBM and Cisco and Schneider and all these big companies who are here today, they continue to work in silos. You know, the important thing is about horizontal integration, and horizontal integration with planners, with architects. That's the key. You can radically change the world only if these technology providers integrate themselves with the geographical planners. Number three, the time is very short.
Yeah.
The time is very short because, I mean, the world has already become fairly unsustainable thanks to America. You know, so if you want...
Well, at least you have a bad example to learn from.
You don't have time for an evolutionary approach. You need a revolutionary approach. And therefore, It's very, very important, I think, that we create some live examples of cities where this integration has taken, you know, you've succeeded in parts. You've succeeded in parts in Amsterdam. You've succeeded in parts in Rio de Janeiro. You've succeeded in parts in Stockholm. But an integrated city with all its comprehensive nature, especially where it impacts citizens in terms of education and health, has not been done as yet.
Right.
And that's the key.
I mean, there are some good example. Portland was an integrated plan. New York City was another one. So I do want to just not completely trash.
I've never had to defend my nation before.
I mean, I'm European.
But I don't want to defend our nation on the criticism for which, at least, like I said, Portland is considered one of the greenest cities in the United States and one of the greenest
and more compact.
one of the greenest cities in the world. But again, as I said, high price on a low national U.S. standard. I think that those last couple of points you made that I spoke to earlier, I'd just underscore, and that is smart cities would be achieved as well if the academic achievement rate in most parts of the world was to improve by 10 to 20%. You would have an uptick in a whole bunch of important success or smart city measures. And so again, the tradition to the person, I agree totally with the assumption of the question is there's been a lot of engineers and a lot of architects. That is centuries of planning, and city planning was about streets and roads and sewers, and those are all very important, but fundamentally is about the success of your people. And that holistic strategic planning is what's missing.
To me, I think that
just to echo, I think it's got to be private sector driven. I think it's real world we're talking about, and that can only come from private sector.
Okay.
Well, I'd respectfully disagree.
Good.
See, now the session
I think
is really
I think
started.
it's a public-private partnership, but you got to have academia there, and you got to have the NGOs there as well.
But I still think it has to be private sector led.
Whoa. They got to be involved.
See, you want to address this? Because there's one more question I want to get to, but you have a point on this as well.
Yeah, I wanted to add two things. There are curriculum in, at least in my home country, where I know that smarter cities and the technology going with it is part of the curriculum now. But also I'd like to add that under the European law, a project, research and development project can be implemented in the public sector, and therefore the county of Montpellier in the south of France, the metropole of Nice-Côte d'Azur, also in France, are working, including students in their project, so that in their curriculum they truly participate to the development not only of their city where they are studying, but also understanding the future.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Oh, so I don't know if we get to your question.
I just want to say in general, there's no one-size-fits-all solution for cities, because different cities have different challenges. So what is important is planning is contextual and it's multidisciplinary. It's not necessary from architects or engineers. Actually, planners can come from sociologists, geography graduates, and what have you. All right? So as far as university education is concerned, it's only a basic, and you will have to go and see the real world. Let me share a few examples, or maybe two examples. One, you know the city of Medellin in Colombia has been given the award of most innovative city. And you know how they do? They don't put architects right at the forefront. They actually put sociologists, because it's a different situation, it's a different problems. So they know their own problems, so therefore they have their own solutions. The city of New Delhi, for example, you have a very capable chief minister, Ms. Sheila Dikshit. She is an example of good urban governance. You don't talk about smart city because technology is to be harnessed, but first of all, the basic has to be resolved. So as far as she is concerned, she has greened New Delhi from mere 26 square kilometers to more than 300 square kilometers, and in a very short while. And she has, for example, make it mandatory for the public transportation in New Delhi to use CNG. And that has reduced the pollution level immediately. And she involved what they call word in Indian called bhagidari. That is a self-help. It's like a QCC circle. And she involved 2,300 bhagidari team involving 5 million people, a self-help scheme to upgrade all the environment in New Delhi. And that was the reason how she greened the whole New Delhi, because she has given the citizens the ownership. They gave them a sapling, they also gave them the watering can, and they take charge of it. So there are many solutions. Definitely smart city is actually the way to go in future, but you have to talk about urban governance. That is, I think, the basic towards a successful city before you talk about smart city.
I'd like to answer what you said, which is we need to stop having the IBM, Cisco, Schneider, etc., working in silo. I want to say one thing here, which is...
just to provoke you.
No, but that's fine. We are partners, and I am glad that you take our technology in the Mumbai daily corridor, so that's fine. But the point is, the technology we have in hands, IBM doesn't have the objective in life to operate water infrastructure, energy infrastructure, public transportation infrastructure. This is not our objective in life. So my certainly best partners those days are certainly your providers of public transportation, of water, of electricity, etc. And where I would say that there is the need of a combination of public and political decision-making to help the private companies to look at new ways of working together.
So, IBM integrated business management. Do we have time for one more question? I don't know if we're the conference organizers.
Someone's standing up there.
I'm just going to take, there's this gentleman who's been standing there for 10 minutes. Just the nugget of the question.
Yes, my name is Ilmar Reepalu. I'm from the city of Malmö in Sweden. We are talking about, we are talking about a lot about the smart cities and the most innovative cities. And at the same time, we are raising the question about urbanization. And we know that urbanization has two phases. One part that is planned, properly planned, sometimes planned in the wrong way with wrong references, but about 35% of all the urbanization South Sahara is informal. 25% of the urbanization in Latin America and Asia is informal. That is not planned. And my question is, must we border the discussion so we are not looking for the solutions within the city's boundaries? The cities, probably the solutions is in the connecting the hinterland, how we react with the city together with its surroundings. That's about the transportation corridors. That's how we can have people living in cities, not moving from being urban poor to being from rural poor to be even poorer in the urban areas. So, and then we must also know that we are not only discussing the big cities. For instance, in Europe, the majority of the population is living in cities that are less than 250,000 people. So then the solution is maybe a little different what we are talking about here. That is only to add this and make it a little more complicated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So it was more of a comment than a quickly, and then we'll wrap it up.
No, I was just going to agree. I mean, we now in Asia talk about smart city regions.
Okay.
Because you cannot ignore the hinterland, the connectivity to the hinterland, the relationship with hinterland is absolutely crucial. So maybe we shouldn't just be talking about smart cities. Maybe we're taking what's just been suggested, we should be talking about smart city regions.
Yep, excellent. And it will facilitate the collaborative process. Well, listen, I think the audience agreed this was a fantastic panel with not only smart, but with a lot of humor as well, which I think is part of the smart management. Thank you very, very much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the Congress.